Hey folks, and welcome to another edition of Minister's Bullet. I want to continue to look at some verses in First Corinthians with you. We're going to stick with chapter 8. I want to move to verse 11 and look at verses 11 through 13. Paul writes, "And so by your knowledge this weak person is destroyed, the brother for whom Christ died, thus sinning against your brothers and wounding their conscience when it's weak. You sin against Christ. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble." And I think something Paul wrote in Romans goes right along with this. If you look at Romans 14, 13, he wrote, "Therefore, let us not pass judgment on another any longer, but rather decide never to put a stumbling block or hindrance in the way of a brother." Um, as you've heard me speak at length in the past, sin is not always black and white. Certainly, if Scripture addresses it, then no doubt that's going to be a sin for everybody. But many, if not most, sins are specific to the person when the Spirit convicts the individual on something they should or shouldn't do. It can be a sin for that person, and it may be perfectly okay for another person. And this is what Paul is talking about. He gives the example of eating meat. That if the one brother believes eating meat to be sinful, then Paul is saying, well, I'm not going to eat meat in front of that person. We must consider. I'll give you an example that's very relevant today in our culture. Alcohol. Scripture does not specify that drinking small amount of alcohol is sinful. Drunkenness is certainly named as a sin, but drinking a small amount, that's not labeled as sinful. But it very well could be a sin for someone, for instance, if they're an alcoholic and they've struggled with alcohol addiction in the past, and now they're convicted that even drinking a small amount of alcohol is sin. I would encourage, if you have someone like that in your life, you know someone, that it would be courteous and respectful to your brother to not drink around them or not invite them to gatherings where alcohol is going to be served. This is what Paul is talking about, considering where our brothers and sisters are at and not hindering their walk with God, not putting a stumbling block in front of them that's going to cause them to stumble and fall into sin. He's saying if you do that, then you are sinning yourself. You're sinning against Christ, and that's just something we need to keep in mind. To be respectful of where our brothers and sisters are at, and not to lead them into a place where they're going to be weak and could sin. What we are to do is to build one another up, to think of others before we think of ourselves. The Scripture tells us to count others as more significant than ourselves. We think of our brothers and sisters first, and certainly if we know them to be weak in an area, if they believe something to be sinful, then we should respect that, and we should help and build them up to avoid that sin, not lead them into a place where they're going to be susceptible to it and could fall into the trap of sin. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and join and follow us on these platforms.